The state and the defense have come to an agreement in this case.
A near decade-long saga comes to an end. Dogged by accusations for 9 years, Attorney General Ken Paxton will have charges dismissed in a settlement. In studio, we talk to his lawyer.
You had no evidence that Ken Paxton had done anything illegal.
A man in the middle of big stories all year.
This is good, and now it's over.
We ask him what's next, now that Denton County Republicans want to send him to Austin. Then, Dallas voters face a May election worth more than $1 billion.
Everybody thinks, no brainer, it's going to get passed. But we've got to get the vote out, and we've got to have it passed.
We explore the needs and the projects on the ballot.
My name is literally anybody else.
And then finally, a North Texas man changes his name to make a point.
We want something better. We deserve something better.
For president, he wants literally anybody else. Up next on Lone Star Politics.
This is Lone Star Politics from NBC5 and the Dallas Morning News.
Good morning. I'm Phil Prazan from NBC5. Gromer Jeffers, political writer with the Dallas Morning News, has this Easter Sunday morning off. A major story winds down after years in limbo. Attorney General Ken Paxton will not stand trial for felony charges brought 9 years ago in Collin County. The case was moved to a Harris County court where Paxton appeared to accept a deal. He does not admit guilt, but does promise to serve 100 hours of community service, 15 hours of ethics training with the state bar, and pay roughly $270,000 to 2 families. Here's one of his defense attorneys, Dan Cogdill.
At the end of the day, it is not a plea bargain. He didn't plead. There is no admission of guilt. There will never be an admission of guilt because he's not guilty, but we're glad to have this behind us. 18 months from now, or perhaps shorter, the case will be dismissed. There will never be a conviction.
Almost a decade ago, Paxton was accused of convincing 2 friends to invest in a McKinney tech company without telling them he was getting paid by that company. Former state representative from Corsicana, Byron Cook, was one of the accusers and thanked prosecutors for their work through a lawyer. The other accuser passed away in Florida last year. The prosecutors say they wanted to make this deal instead of taking it to trial in 3 weeks with the possibility of losing. But the decision came with criticism, a lot of it including from the Texas director of the watchdog Public Citizen, Adrian Shelley. He issued a statement saying in part, quote, the special prosecutors owe an explanation of why a case that threatened to send Paxton to prison for up to 99 years will end following 100 hours of community service, restitution, and 15 hours of legal education. Special prosecutor Brian Weiss responded to the blowback.
I have been called everything but a child of God by these people, and to them I say, I appreciate your concern, and with all due respect, your truth is not the truth. You know 0.5% of what Mr. Silverman and I know about the facts of these cases.
Paxton will remain as Attorney General and has 18 months to complete the terms of the deal. If he backs out, a trial will be rescheduled. In a statement afterward, Paxton wrote he will be speaking more about this issue in the weeks ahead. He still faces a state bar complaint, a civil lawsuit by his former staff, and is under FBI investigation. In studio this morning, we have Mitch Little. He's on Paxton's defense team and just won the Republican primary for the Texas House seat in Denton County. Thanks for being here. Congratulations, by the way.
It's my great pleasure. Thank you so much.
So, for 9 years, you guys have said that Paxton is not guilty. He said he's not guilty.
That's right.
Was there a point, though, in that process where you thought that this case is going towards a settlement?
So that did not actually come up until maybe the last couple of months, Phil. So I think it's helpful for your viewers to understand over the course of 9 years, everything in this case for Ken Paxton was really a one-of-one situation. Mm-hmm. You had special prosecutors who were being paid at an illegal pay rate. The Court of Appeals already decided that issue. Case was moved to Harris County, 4 hours away from where Ken Paxton lives. There were a number of disadvantages to General Paxton as he kind of traveled through this process. But you know what actually changed the dynamic in the last couple of months was, one, the prosecutors realized they were not going to be paid the illegal pay rate that they originally agreed with the judge in Collin County. And two, they actually started interviewing some of the people who were the alleged complainants in this case and realized maybe that case wasn't as strong as they thought it was.
Well, that's an interesting point, because there was some Houston Chronicle reporting on that, where some of the witnesses said Paxton did nothing wrong. One of the key accusers passed away last year, and then another accuser, Byron Cook, I think we can describe as a political opponent of Attorney General Paxton. They just looked around and said, maybe we don't have the evidence we thought.
So it was very difficult for me waking up the next day on Wednesday this week and reading the Chronicle article about how weak the case was, because we had been telling the special prosecutors that for 9 years. The failure to register charge that was levied against General Paxton was preempted by federal law. It never should have been brought in the first place. We told the special prosecutors that. And obviously the situation with Byron Cook, I've filed, as a civil lawyer, I filed 4 separate securities fraud lawsuits against Byron Cook. He was not a babe in the woods. He was certainly a political opponent of the Attorney General and a hyper-sophisticated investor. I don't think if we had tried the case there would have been a conviction on any count, but it is a great relief to the Paxton family, I know, and to the rest of our defense team that there will be no trial, because, as you know, when you seat 12 jurors, anything can happen, especially in Harris County.
So Attorney General Ken Paxton has cleared kind of 2 of 5 major hurdles that's been in his way. The impeachment, he was acquitted. The charges will be dismissed. Yep. He faces the civil lawsuit from his former staff, a bar complaint, and is under an investigation. Are you confident that that the same result will happen and he'll clear all those hurdles?
I'm incredibly confident. I think the thing that people need to understand is Ken Paxton has been in a 360-degree battlefield for the last couple of years. He's coming out of that. He's coming out of it stronger. He's had political opponents call him, I believe on this show, also a sophisticated criminal. I think we're all past that now. I think the people of Texas are past it, and we all need to move on. The bar complaint never should have been brought in the first place. That should be immediately dismissed. Obviously, the things with the whistleblowers, that's going to have to take its course. And ultimately, the legislature is going to vote on whether to fund any settlement or any judgment, even, that the whistleblowers obtained. So this chapter needs to come to a close, Phil.
Well, on Twitter, you kind of explained some of this about how long this process has lasted, including at the end, where you said, quote, "We are in the preamble of reform in the great state of Texas, and there will be a proper accounting." Tell us more about that. What do you mean?
Well, let's start with the impeachment. So if you look at last year, we still don't know how much the impeachment cost the people of the state of Texas. The Speaker of the House, Dade Phelan, has refused to turn over the records that would audit the actual cost to the people of Texas of that impeachment process. That should have already come out. It will come out in the future at some point, whether under his leadership or someone else's.
But these are policy changes you think need to happen?
I think there are policy changes. Well, first of all, we need transparency on the question of how much it costs. The policy changes are an entirely different issue. Should we ever have a special prosecutor who's hired at $250 an hour to prosecute anyone, Republican or Democrat, in the state? Never.
So statewide kind of rules on that?
Absolutely. We need to make it extremely clear. We need to make it clear for both people on the right and left that political prosecutions of that type are not going to be tolerated.
Hang around. We'll keep talking, and we'll put some more of that on the web, but we'll move on for now. So thanks for talking with us about this issue this morning. We did reach out to Little's opponent, Democrat House District 65 candidate Dietrich DeBurr. You can read his response online at NBCDFW.com. Also developing, a Fort Worth grandmother convicted in a voting fraud case no longer faces jail time. The state's Second Court of Appeals threw out the conviction, saying there was not enough evidence to convict Crystal Mason. In 2016, she submitted a provisional ballot while on parole for a federal fraud case. Mason said she did not know she couldn't vote. The vote was not counted. The ACLU calls in a vindication after a 7-year fight.
Never get discouraged. Know your rights. If you're eligible to vote, please vote. And don't let my story discourage you, but encourage you to go to the polls.
Mason was initially sentenced to 5 years. She served 10 months before the appeal process began. The case also sparked a law change. As part of a sweeping election bill, the Texas legislature changed voter fraud laws to require prosecutors to prove a person knowingly cast an illegal ballot. Big bucks are on the line in Dallas. The 10 propositions with more than $1 billion. Voters will have to weigh in on. We'll take a closer look at what's at stake. Plus, a chance to vote for literally anybody else for President of the United States. A North Texan shares his strategy. You're watching Lone Star Politics. Texas primary races that ended without a candidate getting 50% of the vote now head to a runoff. That happens Tuesday, May 28th. But first, some North Texans will head to the polls on Saturday, May 4th for special elections. Several cities in Dallas, Denton, Collin, and Tarrant counties will elect a mayor, fill city council seats, or weigh in on a bond issue. And that's what brings us to Dallas. For a fourth time in the last 20 years, the city is turning to residents for some major money. Dallas voters will vote on 10 propositions that would allow the city to borrow a total of $1.25 billion. The city just recently finalized how the dollars would be divided up in order to cover hundreds of projects, from roads to parks and libraries and public safety to flood protection and economic development. The goal now is to get voters on board. I sat down with attorney Tim Powers, who co-chairs the bond campaign. The election is May 4th. May elections are notorious for low turnout. What are you going to be doing from now until then to get the vote out?
Well, thanks, Phil. You're exactly right with regard to that. Absolutely notorious for low turnout, especially a low turnout in an even year election in a typical city of Dallas environment where there is low voter turnout and there's no contest, and everybody says, oh my gosh, we want our streets fixed, we want new parks, we want a new police academy, we want our cultural arts improved. Everybody thinks, no brainer, it's going to get passed. But we've got to get the vote out, and we've got to have it passed.
For the 10 propositions, most of this is for streets and parks.
Well, streets, parks, and public safety. 75% of it goes to those three things. But you call it, whether you want to call it a quality of life or just the improvements that are needed. But you probably have read or seen the background that when the city manager came out and had the original list of capital improvements that need to be done, he had a list of $16 billion in projects, and the bond obviously at $1.25 billion, which is what can be done without raising any new taxes as part of our typical bond cycle.
It seems like a lot of the debate was, are we going big enough with $1.25 billion? You said $16 billion a second ago. I saw in the Dallas Morning News it was up to $24 billion. Why only $1.25 billion and not higher?
So all of this has to do with being able to issue bonds in a way that there won't be an increase in the tax rate, so that can be done. We probably could have gone a little higher than that, but the city council wanting to be conservative in what they did with regard to the final number. And you may recall that it originally started as $1 billion, and then over the last 45 days or so, it got up another $250 million. Well,
but the key there is to not increase taxes. This is what we can do as a city without increasing taxes.
Correct.
Gotcha. At NBC DFW, our investigative team has worked on a lot of stories about dangerous roads.
Keep working on those between now and May 4th.
Because some of this money will go to improve safety on the roads?
$550 million plus will go to road improvements.
Why is that important?
Well, you drive in this city, I drive in this city. We want to attract new people to this city. We want our city to grow. We want it to be safe, and it becomes incredibly important that we have great streets.
You named the UNT Dallas Police Academy. Are there any other big projects that stand out to you?
Well, I think they're all great projects, and if anybody wants to see it, I think there's over 700 projects that will be involved in part of this. And on the city's website related to this bond, there is a construction and management page, and you can see the list of those 700 projects. The Police Academy is obviously a big one, and one that the city's been focused on for 30 years of trying to get done. So it's a shining example of something that will be new. But new libraries, I believe it's 3 new libraries that we'll have that are part of this. Several new parks.
What do you think are the stakes? Because if this gets voted down, what does that mean for the city?
Well, I mean, to me personally be a huge disaster. And I think everybody understands this. This is infrastructure that we need to have to keep our city moving forward. And it would be a huge setback if it doesn't pass. There is no known organized opposition to the bond campaign. At the same time, we've got to get people out.
For more on the propositions and the May 4th election, log on to NBCDFW.com. We have a link to the specific projects, nearly 700 of them. Early voting begins April 22nd. The North Texan jumping into the race for the White House with a clever new campaign.
My name is literally anybody else, and I'm running for President of the United States.
Decision 2024 when Lone Star Politics continues. Next week, Speaker Mike Johnson is expected to send impeachment articles against Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas to the upper chamber. In a letter to Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, the Republican speaker from Louisiana said, quote, "We urge you to schedule a trial of the matter expeditiously." Schumer says senators will be sworn in as jurors on April 11th, one day after the articles of impeachment are scheduled to be delivered. The GOP-controlled House voted to impeach Mayorkas last month for, quote, high crimes and misdemeanors, including his willful and systematic refusal to comply with the law and his breach of the public trust. Now, the Democratic-controlled Senate is expected to acquit Mayorkas. His supporters argue this is all political and simply over policy Republicans don't like, not crimes. And just as the congressional session ended last week, Georgia Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene filed a motion to oust Speaker Mike Johnson. Greene is upset with the Speaker for what she says is his continued negotiations with Democrats. She said the clock has started.
But we need a Speaker of the House that knows how to negotiate, knows how to walk in the room, knows how to hold the line, and knows how to defend America first and the values and the policies that President Trump will bring to
It is unclear whether the House will take action on the motion. Mike Johnson became Speaker about 5 months ago after Kevin McCarthy was ousted. Turning now to the race for the White House. The latest Quinnipiac survey of just Democrat and Republican voters found a 3-point difference in support for President Joe Biden over former President Donald Trump. When the matchup is expanded to include all parties, Trump leads with 39% support, Biden with 38%, and independent candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. receives 13%, indicating many people want other options. Which raises a question. Would you vote for literally anybody else? That's the name of the North Texas teacher aiming to jump into the race. Meredith Yeomans asked him about his drastic action.
So many questions for the presidential hopeful I was about to interview, and began with the most basic.
My name is literally anybody else, and I'm running for President of the United States of America.
Meet literally anybody else.
The first name is literally, middle name is anybody, and the last name is else.
The North Richland Hills father and veteran, formerly known as Dustin Eby, who legally changed his name and launched a bid for president, an idea he admits began as a joke.
I didn't change my name when it was a joke. I would not have changed my name. You know, that, my father-in-law puts it nicely, that juice was not worth the squeeze.
Else says he bought the domain literallyanybodyelse.com early last year and started making T-shirts with the name. He says he got serious when he realized Biden and Trump would be back on the ballot.
America wants something different. You know, we want something better. We deserve something better.
So he filed a petition for a name change in January, then went before a Tarrant County judge.
She looks at me and she says, "Are you really going to be that guy?" And I paused for a moment, and I was like, somebody has to.
The 35-year-old 7th grade math teacher is now doing interviews with media outlets around the globe.
It was kind of a build-up.
Fixated on his mission to neutralize the nonsense.
I should not be popular. There is zero reason why literally anybody else should be taking off the way it is.
Else needs 113,000 voter signatures by mid-May to give Texas voters 3 options in November: Donald Trump, Joe Biden, and literally anybody else. Meredith Yeomans, NBC5.
So Els says he plans to change his name back to Dustin Eby if he wins or loses the election. And we'll have to leave it right there. That's all the time we have. Stay tuned for Meet the Press with Kristen Welker. I'm Phil Prazan for our entire crew. Thanks for joining us. Happy holidays, happy Easter, and we'll see you back here next Sunday for more Lone Star Talk.